Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Grung. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And I'm Hovik Manucharyan.
And in this Conversations on Grung episode, we will discuss the UN Security Council meeting about a month ago when they discussed the Artsakh blockade. We'll also touch upon the Yerevan City Council elections, which are due to take place this Sunday, September 17. This episode is being recorded on September 13, 2023. So today we are joined by Ms. Dziunik Aghajanian, who has served Armenia through the ranks of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and most recently as a diplomat as Armenia's ambassador to such countries as the Netherlands, Malaysia, Indonesia. She received her education at Yerevan State University, Columbia University in New York, and Uppsala University in Sweden. Ms. Aghajanian has recently joined Dziunik Aghajanian's Mair Hayastan movements. Ambassador Aghajanian, welcome to the show.
Welcome, everybody.
Hello again. Ambassador, on August 16, at the request of Armenia, the UN Security Council held a meeting or held a hearing on the blockade of Artsakh, and various countries spoke out, some surpassing expectations, surprisingly, and delivering pro-Armenian speeches, and others, especially like countries like Brazil, delivering very disappointing pro-Azerbaijani speeches. However, in the end, what's most important is that there was no resolutions. No speeches were made by the president of the Security Council. And so far, almost a month later, there haven't been any follow-ups or follow-throughs. In the past, you've held various important roles at the MFA. So including, I believe, heading the International Organizations Division there. So we're really excited at the opportunity to ask these questions to you directly. First of all, at a high level, how would you evaluate the results of the UN Security Council meeting on August 16?
Well, let me add that I was also the Deputy Permanent Representative of Armenia at the UN, so I know how things work at the UN at different levels and different bodies. I'm not surprised that this hearing was held without any actual document or summary or whatever following, because of the whole working method of the Security Council, and also because of the first indication that we got from even the naming of the agenda item under which the Security Council hearing was held. The thing is that before putting the agenda item, there is a discussion and agreement between different parties, and most importantly, the Security Council member states, how to refer to it. As you know, in the UN, we had an agenda item that was called the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, or in and around Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And this time, the reference at the Security Council was to the letter almost a year ago, referring to
September 13th, right?
Yes, Azerbaijani aggression on September 13, 2022, exactly 1 year ago. So it showed that there's no agreement under what kind of a naming the agenda item should be referred to. And that comes because during this whole year, and also during the last 4 or 5 years, there was a constant effort kind of to delete the reference to Nagorno-Karabakh Republic as republic, later on to Nagorno-Karabakh as reference to a whole political entity, which is an unrecognized area of attempting to achieve political status. So given this fact, and given the references made during the Brussels and Washington meetings that did not mention Nagorno-Karabakh per se, and was referring to the Armenians of the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, ethnic Armenians, and trying to kind of negotiate some kind of rights and security issues for them under the Azerbaijani jurisdiction. I was not surprised to see that the reference was made to the letter of a year ago, and no reference to the actual letters for which the hearing was held. which was referring to this humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. So that was also the indication that there was no agreement among the member states, which was not surprising following the political developments, and that simply the hearing was made to satisfy, I would say, the Armenian public, kind of to ease the situation internally in Armenia, and also give some reasoning to the Armenian authorities in the Republic of Armenia, to show as if they are making a lot of efforts to cope with the situation and get international support towards achieving the opening of the Lachin corridor. So that was the background under which the hearing was held, and the members of the Security Council that spoke, especially from the Western Bloc, they exactly showed that they are even afraid to use the term Nagorno-Karabakh, because most of them referred to the situation only when they were speaking about the ICJ decision. So they were not even naming the area, and that was also in the speech of the UN Department for, if I'm not mistaken, for humanitarian assistance. So there was not a single naming of Nagorno-Karabakh in the speech, and the person who was giving the statement simply said the area under discussion. So that was the total understanding of what we're referring to. And given the situation, it is impossible to get any resolution. If there was a resolution, it would be very dangerous one, because then it would name Nagorno-Karabakh under Azerbaijani jurisdiction, which will be the first document in history doing that.
Yeah, that was, I was going to ask you about that, because I saw Vartan Oskanyan's warning about that in one of the videos preceding the meeting. Do you believe, nevertheless, that the Armenian government could have done anything to change the situation, have a better outcome for us? Or is it all dependent on the international climate and environment that we are operating in?
No, it is the Armenian government that has kind of destroyed the whole structure under which the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict was being negotiated. It gave up the issue of self-determination and turned the whole thing into some kind of a humanitarian issue, and the negotiation under the title Rights and Securities for the people of Nagorno, not even people, the residents of Nagorno-Karabakh. Huh? So
yeah, the Armenian population.
Armenian population, and even at certain points they refer to residents, which is a very dangerous thing, because there is no status reference, there's no political reference, there's no political status discussion under this kind of language, and it is a very dangerous thing to do. And that was because the Armenian government under the current leadership simply is satisfying the Turkic-Azerbaijani demands, and they are trying to present it as if it is the understanding of international community, whereas that is not true. And the international community works according to the international law and regulations, and international law and regulations speak about the right of people to self-determination. And for the last more than 2 decades, the whole negotiation process was going under those auspices in international law. So the geopolitical interests for which this current government is trying to sacrifice the Nagorno-Karabakh people's right to self-determination and the recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh as a separate political entity is simply in an effort to satisfy these geopolitical interests under the Turkish and Azerbaijani demands.
Interesting. Ambassador, a week later, on August 24, Le Figaro reported that France was getting ready to propose a new resolution at the Security Council. Meanwhile, around the same time, we heard allegations that it was the US was trying to derail any potential resolution against Azerbaijan. Of course, that was denied by the United States. But these rumors about the potential French resolution, as I said, were more than 10 days ago, while the crisis in Artsakh is deepening by the day. Do you have any, updates through the news that you follow or through your channels, if and when France plans to submit a resolution, or what can we expect from France in the future on this?
Well, I explained that any resolution that comes to floor at the UN Security Council has to have the agreement at least for the majority of the membership. Given the fact that the Western Bloc, as I said, to which France belongs, follows the Washington-Brussels line of negotiations currently ongoing, it is simply impossible to get any resolution on the floor with an agreed language. So I would say that whatever we heard from Le Figaro is simply trying to appease the Armenian community in France and to show the Armenian population in Armenia that France is standing by the Armenian people for their interests, kind of help the shift from the Russian influence toward the Western influence, given the fact that in the different kind of polls and it shows that the people of Armenia are still very friendly and giving some hope for the French efforts. They are trying to kind of bring that up a little bit more so that the shift towards the Western countries and Western Bloc will be much smoother than otherwise would be expected given the situation on the ground. So I think that was the first sign and the indication that a new wave of anti-Russian sentiment will be coming, which we see nowadays happening, and giving a boost to the pro-French attitudes in the Armenian public to help that shift be more smoothly accomplished.
Asbed, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask about the changes that have happened over the past week to 2 weeks in Artsakh. Samvel Shahramanian is now the president of Artsakh, and I want to know, Ms. Aghajanian, what are your thoughts about these changes? What do they mean, or what do they portend for us?
Well, I'm happy that this change occurred, and it occurred with the almost unanimous approval of the members in the parliament, except for one political group that was following Samvel Babayan's attempt to actually force the population of Nagorno-Karabakh to accept the Azerbaijani jurisdiction. And I am happy that also the people of Nagorno-Karabakh support this election, and the new president of Karabakh, I think, is well suited, given the support both from political parties and the people, to achieve the unity and the readiness for the people to withstand all this suffering and difficulties that Artsakh is facing nowadays. It is there is no question that without the will of people, there will be impossible. It will be simply impossible to withstand and become stronger, and to kind of force its political stance and follow all these efforts that were made more than 30 years ago in achieving independence. So nowadays it is important to have a trusted leader in the country that the people can trust and follow his leadership in achieving the far-reaching goals for the people of Artsakh.
Do you think that opening both the Lachin corridor and the Aghdam-Agna road should be made an equivalent, pardon me, yeah, there should be parity between those two avenues for aid?
No, there cannot be any parity, though the Western countries are trying to present it as an equal options. And in many cases, in the language they use, especially the US and Brussels, we see that first
and the Russians, actually.
Russians speak about the corridor. They don't speak about the route. But the Western members that speak about it, they either speak about the route, so there's no status for that, they refer, and they kind of equalize one to each other. And that is also according to their understanding that the Lachin corridor, that the status of the Lachin corridor that is enshrined in the Trilateral Declaration should be slowly and smoothly erased in a way. And that's why they are pushing for the Aghdam road to be opened parallel to the possible Lachin route being operational. And the main reason for the forcing for the Aghdam road is to open up the so-called integration process, to get the agreement of the people of Karabakh to have connection and to have integration processes. In the future, we'll see also attempts to force the connecting the electricity lines, the gas lines, or the gas pipeline to Azerbaijan infrastructure. So in an attempt to totally and fully cut off Artsakh from Armenia and to force people to accept under the suffering and hardship the integration with Azerbaijan. So this is the background for which they are trying to put parallels with Lachin corridor. And I don't believe that Azerbaijan will open Lachin corridor. They will try to bring up new conditions and preconditions, trying to get more and more integration efforts. Though I believe that allowing the Russian Red Cross truck enter through Aghdam road is not integration, because that road was operational before the full closure of Lachin corridor as well. And besides, it's not anything coming from Azerbaijan. It's coming through the territory of Azerbaijan, but it is not coming from Azerbaijan.
I was a little surprised to see that aid come through without the Red Crescent trucks as well, because I also don't believe that they have any incentive to open the Lachin corridor.
They were trying to force it because they understand that once one step is made, it will be harder to withstand the next step. But the people are very, the people do not really want any integration to take place, full understanding that that particular step will be kind of signing under their own sentence for like that sentence, for the whole region and for the whole area. And that's one of the reasons the people do not want. And also the whole situation is created by Azerbaijan with the silent support from the Western countries, actually using the current Russian inoperative situation there, that they cannot use any force, because that use of force will be equivalent to opening a second front, which is what the Western countries are trying to do for the last 2 years. And so given this very difficult situation, the Russian peacekeepers cannot use any kind of forceful means to open the Lachin corridor. So that exacerbates the whole situation on the ground, on both the status and the image of the Russian peacekeepers, and also the actual humanitarian situation on the ground with the people of Artsakh. But I think the full understanding that anything accepted from Azerbaijan will be opening the doors and the gates for the integration, and there will be no coming back afterwards. is something that keeps people together, and they are very persistent in not allowing that to happen. Let's hope they will be successful in that.
So let me ask the same question we asked on our Week in Review a couple of days ago. What cards do Samvel Shahramanian and David Ishkhanian hold in standing up for the people of Artsakh?
Well, first is the will of the people of Artsakh. Huh? That's something that nobody can discard. And I believe that those who charted this plan did not expect for the people to withstand all this hardship for such a long time. And what Azerbaijan is currently doing is actually genocidal policy being carried out on the ground. And we see the reports coming out from many very reputable institutions and think tanks that are actually telling it's genocide being carried out. And the Western countries that try to close this issue, the conflict, forever, by forcing the Artsakh people to integrate into Azerbaijan, they are actually becoming culprits of the same plan. So the blame falls on them too, be it through silent operation or through the support that they are actually giving to Azerbaijan, also by saying, like Michel is doing, or Borrell is doing, that we are not going to sanction Azerbaijan in any way because we were depending on the energy supplies from them. Huh? So all this shows that they are actually becoming culprits of a genocidal policy. Yeah. And that goes against the whole idea of human rights, protection of human rights, responsibility to protect that the Western countries were pushing forward in the UN and giving the reason for intervention when there are genocidal policies or threat for ethnic cleansing being carried out in different parts of the world. So it shows that this political expediency that we were speaking about the Armenian genocide 100 years ago has gone nowhere. It is still there. It is just being covered by the ideas of so-called democracy and human rights, which are not being fulfilled when the actual need for that is there, and the people need their assistance, and the whole international mechanism put in place to be operational to protect and support the people from all crimes against humanity. So it's not working. And the next thing is that by unifying their efforts, the Armenian people in Karabakh can actually also unify in the resources that they have and have more effective and more equitable distribution of resources to the whole population of Nagorno-Karabakh. They are not that poor. They can do a lot if they come together and do it the right way. And by surviving through the hardship, they can regain the power, the internal psychological power that they had when they stood up in 1988, 1989, and then throughout the First Karabakh War, and actually achieve victory afterwards, because the international community cannot close their eyes forever. We see signs of them speaking out a lot, especially the people that, like Caroline Cox and others, that have always stood by the Armenian cause. And this is not going to happen by the silent approval of those geopolitical centers that try to actually close the issue forever. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things are going together. Time is changing. Situation around Karabakh and situation around Russia in the Ukraine-Russia war is changing. Situation in Armenia is changing. The people's understanding of the whole situation is changing. And I hope that in near future we'll see change also in Armenia that will totally change the picture and the conditions under which we operate.
Ambassador, just one last question on this topic. You obviously mentioned resources, which by definition are finite. You mentioned time. Do we have any specific idea of what is needed for the government and the people in Artsakh in terms of their own sacrifices? Is this a struggle that will take months or years? What do you think will need to happen? Because frankly, allow me to disagree with you that more vocal reports about Caroline Cox or other players will probably not change this if, for instance, there's a strategic conflict between the US and Russia, which is setting the stage for what's happening. So, one thing that you said worried me that, Azerbaijan will never open the Lachin or Berzor corridor. And part of me thinks that, how long can these people last under these conditions if that corridor is not open, at least for emergency supplies?
Well, Azerbaijan will not open the corridor unless there's a forceful demand from the Western countries. And that forceful demand will come as the people like Caroline Cox and others and international organizations speak and demand action from the Western governments. So these things go together. They cannot simply overlook the whole thing and kind of discard all these calls, because that will turn into internal issues within their own countries. And the diaspora Armenians can play a big role in raising these issues and raising awareness and demanding action from their own governments. The more the demand goes, the harder it will be for the Western governments to close their eyes and not go for action following the actual decision by the ICJ, which is obligatory for all member states. So if it wasn't for the whole geopolitical issues under which this whole situation is developing, the next day when the decision was taken, the Security Council would have come out with a resolution demanding opening of the Lachin corridor. So things are changing, as you mentioned rightfully. Things with the US-Russia conflict, I would say, because it's a conflict being played out on the Ukrainian soil. This conflict is also changing as we see the election processes in the US starting. We see more and more efforts and speeches to start some kind of a negotiation process with the Russians in order to achieve some kind of a ceasefire or halt of the military actions on the ground. So things are changing. The political discourse is changing. The people in the Western countries, be in Europe or in the US, are tired of this whole Ukrainian situation, and they are coming out with demands of spending no more money for the support of the Ukrainian government and military actions. So things are changing, and these changes are bringing more changes in the overall situation, opening up to possibilities for the Artsakh issue to be actually resolved according to the principles and norms of the UN Charter and international law, respecting the right of people to self-determination. Now about the resources in Karabakh, yes, the resources are finite. The resources are finite everywhere. So if you put any country under this kind of total blockade, they won't survive for long, especially when during the past several years, a lot of efforts were carried out to make Artsakh more dependent on Armenia, because less production was carried out there, only some like pomegranate field and other things were being grown. Big farms were being cultivated rather than small farmers being using their soil to grow vegetables and fruits for their own supply. And now the whole thing is changing into this kind of small farmers supplying their own population. Of course, it won't suffice the 100% of the demand, but it will cut the sharpness of the need and sharpness of the situation. That requires time, and that is also the reason why Azerbaijan shoots at the farmers working in the fields, because they know once the farmers do their work, Karabakh can go on for a very, very long time. So they are trying to not only suffocate through the closure of the corridor, but also not allow the farmers to collect the crop that they have grown or do work in the fields in order to grow more that they would require for their food supply. I think that in the coming weeks, we will see, as we see more support from different international humanitarian organizations, people that are usually standing by the human rights and support for Nagorno-Karabakh, and also the Armenian diaspora people that will demand action from their governments. We will see more and more forceful demand toward Azerbaijan, and possibly sanctions being discussed for implementing, trying to force Azerbaijan to open the Lachin corridor. So this whole thing goes together, and everybody has to do their work in order to force Azerbaijan to open the corridor. So this is the I would say currently the only possibility for us for the reopening of the corridor, because 1 or 2 trucks through Aghdam by the Russian Red Cross won't solve the situation. Yeah. It will, of course, give some room for some families to survive a little bit more, but it won't change the situation. We need the constant supply, and they follow the rhetoric of the Azerbaijani government. They say, we will let whatever we want to let through the routes, and it will go according to the custom and other regulations of Azerbaijan. So that is also an issue, because agreeing to that means you agree that Karabakh is Azerbaijan. So the whole discourse follows what the Prime Minister of Armenia, the current Prime Minister of Armenia, is trying to push into the heads of the Armenians, that it's just a humanitarian issue. We should not politicize it. And if it is a humanitarian issue, you can supply people through many routes, no problem there.
Ambassador, you have emphasized how time changes everything. One of those changes is coming on Sunday, September 17. Hopefully. I'm taking us to a domestic environment, the domestic scene. September 17 is the date of the Yerevan mayoral, or more technically speaking, Yerevan City Council Aghajanian elections.
Yes.
An MPG poll this past weekend yielded the following results. Civil contract with Dikran Avinyan has a little more than 16%. National Progress with Hovik Manucharyan has almost 12%. Mair Hayastan, a movement to which you belong, with Dziunik Aghajanian as its candidate, is just eking out 5.1%. And there are, of course, Manitan Dilyan, Artsakh and others. And there's about 22 to 23% who are still undecided, refuse to disclose, etc. The last time that you were on this show with us, we discussed why you joined Mair Hayastan movement at that time. I believe there was no formal announcement about participating in the elections, but many months have passed since then, and there's now less than a week until the end of the campaigning. So are you actively participating in the campaign, and what are your present thoughts about these elections? And first of all, tell us what you think. Are we having free and fair campaigning, and will the results be also free and fair?
Well, let me start by stating why Mair Hayastan movement actually joined the election campaign. As I said earlier, we were not intending to go for the city council elections, and rather trying to galvanize the opposition-minded part of the population into efforts to change the current government. But as the things developed, we saw that there is no single unified candidate from the opposition that we would be happy to support and join the whole campaigning for that candidate. And after very lengthy and difficult discussions, we decided that it will be unfair to leave these opposition-minded people without the possibility for a choice, given the strategy of the current leading party to bring up small groups of different kind of parties in order to kind of disjoint the whole process. And by playing this kind of a game, like we saw in 2021, when there were more than 20 different parties participating in the election, kind of to disjoint the whole electorate into small groups and minimizing the support for the opposition that way. So it is like you erase the vote of those people who do not agree with the governing party and are ready to give their voice to somebody else. But then, in effect, these particular votes are being redistributed into those that have passed the margin, and in that way, kind of these people trying to vote against the governing party are actually supporting the governing party because their votes are being redistributed according to the percentages of those parties that have passed the margin. So we decided that given the fact that there's a huge amount of disagreement in the population and it will be unfair to leave them without a choice, we decided to go for it. And there was an alliance of two parties and the movement made to go for the elections. So we do really hope that opposition-minded people will vote for us. And I don't believe the polls that we are seeing we are accurate, because usually the Armenian voters decide the last 2-3 days. This is the situation. And a lot of people currently that do not support the government are afraid to honestly speak out about their votes, their choices. So we will see the actual results after the elections. As for the fairness of the whole campaign, it is already marred by the use of administrative resources. We see it every day. Even just to give you a very recent example, like today, the deputy mayor, who is also the candidate from the governing party, opens up a solar panel electrical station at Yerevan Lake, and he's not supposed to be acting as deputy mayor because he should be on vacation doing his campaigning. So it's like joining the campaign with his position and trying to show things that are not supposed to be presented as part of the campaign,
Well, we've also read news reports that some municipal workers or government workers have been required to attend some of their rallies. Those have been denied by the party, but there are all these rumors around.
There are video recordings of that. So everybody who is interested can see people being collected by numbers and by orders of their directors and bosses to show up at the parties. But also just the day before yesterday, the day before yesterday, the Prime Minister gave an interview about Karabakh, and half of his interview was devoted to the election and campaigning for his candidate, which is also use of administrative resources and violation of the electoral code. So, I mean, in this case, I mean, there are widespread, and I don't believe that we will have fair elections and clean elections in this instance. but all the parties and also the alliance participating and all those NGOs that are going to be observing the election process the day of the election have to do their work in order not filling the like ballot stuffing, etc., etc.
You mentioned a couple of moments ago that Armenians don't make up their mind about these elections until 2-3 days before. I mentioned that there's an important contingent, 23-24% of the polled respondents said that they are undecided. What's your read of this group, and how can Maher Hayastan pull these people into its camp?
Well, I believe that most of these people will not actually show up at the elections.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and this is because they are so disappointed about everything, about the political processes, about the situation in the country, the security situation around Armenia and in Armenia, the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, that they will simply sit at home and express their discontent with the whole situation. It is regrettable, and we're trying to explain to them that by sitting at home but not going to the polling stations, you're actually voting for the governing party, for the people who you're disappointed at. And inaction in this case is not justified. We will see what happens. Usually, most that we get at the elections in Armenia is about 55% of the electorate. So if at least the opposition-minded people understand that they have to show up at the polls and support at the polling stations and support the opposition candidate and candidates, that way they will stamp their disappointment at the government party and express their disagreement with the policies being carried out in the country. Otherwise, the governing party, if they manage to get significant amount of vote and form a new government, then they will try to show it as support for the whole policy that they are carrying out. And then we will see rapid deterioration of the situation, both around Nagorno-Karabakh, in Armenia, around the Dziunik region, and possible military actions around our borders. So this is the understanding that we're trying to push into the minds of people, and saying and explaining that disappointment should not translate into non-action, and non-action is simply supporting the government party.
What you just said is really important to me, and we were going to ask you later, so we might as well just segue into that. Dziunik Aghajanian has made it clear, and he has made his primary topic for this campaign the removal of the current ruling party and Pashinyan himself from office. At present, he is polling, let's say, a little more than 5%. I want to ask if he does not succeed in getting elected, does this present the kind of danger that you just talked about? Will the results of the elections become grounds for the ruling party to say that essentially this is all a referendum on their policies, including the policies on Artsakh, and suddenly continue the abandonment of Artsakh?
Well, they will definitely attempt to do that if the opposition party, like Maher Hayastan Alliance, does not get significant amount of the vote. But in any case, the opposition parties in Armenia will not stop at the mayoral elections. So that's just one step towards the efforts of removal of the current government. We will do our best. I hope the alliance gets significant amount of votes not to allow the governing party to form the governments this time, and that will help remove all of them from the Yerevan City Council leadership. Actually, removal from the leadership will boost the whole opposition movement in the country, and it will also stop the possibility for the governing party to use Yerevan and its resources for galvanizing support for their national policies being carried out internally and in foreign affairs. So this is something that I hope we get as a result from the elections. No one can tell the exact numbers. And as you mentioned, the poll shows that the governing party does not have a lot of supporters either, because 16% is mostly calculated as about 12 to 14% administrative resources.
Yeah, it's very low.
It's very, very low. So also the people have to understand that this is a very opportune time to attempt to remove them from the governance of the city, opening the doors for further changes in the country.
Yeah. Ambassador, just one more question from me. As you mentioned, Mar Hayastan is an alliance made up of various different parties. And I've been following the campaign as much as I can, and I've heard some criticism of the number 2 contender right now, Hovik Manucharyan, because he was the mayor of Yerevan under civil contract, and we have to mention that he was also the author of the Black versus White and Dividing Society and so forth. And I personally also have my own feelings about him. But given the way things are going, there's a high chance that the party that it is will be the number 2 slot in the elections, and whoever they decide to form a coalition government with would essentially decide the makeup of the future leadership. Is there a chance, that Marutian would form a coalition with civil contract? Would your alliance consider forming a coalition with Marutian in order to capture the majority and essentially the leadership of Yerevan?
Well, I don't consider him as opposition. I believe him to be a satellite of the governing party, and I think it's just a creation to get some opposition-minded people to vote for him rather than for the actual opposition. So this is kind of a part of the game being played out. But we will see the actual numbers after the election. And he has said that he will not form any alliance, no matter what. But we will have to see after the elections. First,
any alliance with civil contract or any alliance with other parties as well?
He said he won't form any alliance with anybody. So this is his position, at least what he expressed. He didn't argue against working with the current government. He said that it's normal that the current government and the city government being from different parties. But he said he won't form any alliances with any party. But we will have to see after the outcome of the elections what actual percentages are there. I don't believe myself at the results being showed by the polls. I think it's also part of the game to show that he's kind of the second most potential candidate. So the people would intend to vote for him. So it's like more indication of inclination rather than the actual polling. But maybe I'm guessing, but we'll see maybe on Monday, the day after the elections, with the actual results of the vote.
Ambassador, a lot of polled respondents have said that they think these elections are about municipal issues, things like transportation and water and, trash collection and things like that. Tevanyan has mostly run a campaign on national issues. And at the current numbers, which I understand you said you do not fully believe, he is not running to win. Do you agree with this strategy? Do you think that some shift should happen so that they can get elected, and after they are elected and in office, they can look after the full agenda? Because right now it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect.
I think it's a misperception that the alliance does not have agenda for the municipal issues. About 40% of our agenda is about municipal issues. We're just not focusing and explaining it a lot because the main issue for us is the change of the government and moving out of this party from the governance for the whole country. So if you follow the Tevanian speeches and also our other representative speeches, they explain the social issues and our approaches for the solution to those issues and also the solutions to the municipal issues. The thing is that we look at the issues as a system. We don't look at them as like piecemeal. We don't have piecemeal approach to those issues because unless you look at them as one complex that need proper management and proper addressing of all elements of the issue, be it transport, be it trash collection, be it greeneries, be it whatever, you just name it, huh?
Right.
Or seismic stability and safety of the issues, you will not be able to address the whole thing. It has to be a long-term plan put in place and implemented stage by stage with a thorough understanding of where you are starting, what steps you are taking, what goal you're gonna achieve, and making the people and the residents of the city part of the solution, not actually simply those receiving the solution, but they are becoming part of the solution with a full understanding of where the whole thing is going and what will be the next step and the next step and the next phase of the whole process, and being very transparent in the actions you are taking, unlike the current government that actually has done the whole thing upside down throughout its 5 years of ruling. So we haven't focused much on municipal issues and explaining it to people because honestly, it doesn't make any difference when you try to explain to them. The people want solution. And unless you are ruling the city, whatever you say doesn't make any difference before you come to power. Once you are at power, then the way you operate and the way you bring people together, the specialists, the implementers, the beneficiaries of the whole process, they have to come together for the whole process to be understandable, effective, and workable in perspective.
All right, we'll leave it there for today. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck in all your endeavors.
Thank you very much.
You,
and
Ambassador.
I hope we will celebrate on the 18th with significant results for the opposition party coming under the Might Has Done Alliance.
Very good.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much to all of us.
All right, that's our show. We hope you found it useful. Please find us on social media and follow us everywhere where you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes.